Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I've faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. Really excited for this one, but trying to get this one in the works for a long time here. Got a guest episode, got a banker on with us today, so we'll take it easy on him, not to be too hard on him today. But we got Bryce Havlovic from CharterWest Bank, and so I'm really excited to talk to him about the ag lending side of things and really trying to set your operation up for success. So welcome to the podcast here, Bryce, and glad to have you on.
Yes, Garrett, thank you for having me on your podcast. I know we've been trying to get this going for a month or so now, so happy to be on. But I've been working with farmers, producers, ranchers for the past 10 years as an ag lender. Graduated from UNL in 2012, East Campus Kasner student, got my bachelor's degree in ag econ business and finance. I always knew out of high school that I wanted to do something with ag. The next best thing, while not being a farmer, is working with the farmer. So had a few connections with kind of the background of what I needed to do to become an ag lender. And so that's kind of the path that I went down and actually used my degree instead of some people nowadays. But no, happy it worked out as well as it did. But yeah, out of school there, worked with FSA, Farm Service Agency, for 3 years, went through their farm loan officer training program. That was really nice hands-on experience working with beginning farmers that were kind of in distress. So you kind of got both worlds there. Shortly after that, after going through the program, I had an opportunity to get on with a small community bank, farming community bank that my family and originally, I guess, have been with since I could remember. And job opportunity opened, so I took it, mainly doing ag loans with them, and was there for 5 years or so, and then couldn't pass up an opportunity. Another family ran a community bank, just doing 100% ag lending. And yeah, it's everything that I've always wanted to do. Again, working with farmers, producers, ranchers. So it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And a little bit more about me, I guess. Met my wife, Alyssa, while we were going to school there in Lincoln. We have 3 kiddos. All 3 of their birthdays are coming up here in the next month or so. Got 2 older daughters, and then got the lonesome boy, very active. And yeah, time's just flying with them. I grew up in a small farming community in Brainerd, Nebraska, approximately 20 minutes or so straight west of Wahoo there. We moved to Ashland back in 2021, I'd say. And prior to that, we lived in Lincoln. My wife is from a small farm community as well. We knew we were wanting to get out into a more farming community / smaller town. So worked out well. But yeah, as an ag lender, I work with a variety of different farmers, producers, row crop farmers, ranchers, agribusinesses as well. Mainly I help just secure and manage the financing they need to operate and grow, whether that's operating lines, term machinery and equipment loans, long-term farm real estate, kind of handle it all.
Yeah, well, that's great. I do appreciate you sharing your background because it's helpful to know where kind of people come from and the different perspectives that they have. And even coming from a small community, kind of farming community, even if you weren't necessarily in farming in the trenches of it, out in the tractors doing the work, you're still exposed to different things that ag lenders need to be exposed to, and those that need to have kind of that different perspective. I'd imagine, though, a career day at second grade or third grade, whatever it was, to aspire to be a loan officer. But here we are, right?
Exactly. Yep. And like I mentioned, just growing up in that small farming community, all my good close friends, they're back home farming. And I knew I wasn't going to get blessed with that opportunity. Both my mom and dad side of the family, they got out of farming before I think I was even a thought. But yeah, after just hearing the background kind of thing and just being exposed to it, growing up as a kid, I was very active with the 4-H and the FFA side of things as well. So I think I got bit a little early, just had to just find my own avenue when it comes to working with farmers and staying in that ag sector side of things. So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So, no, I appreciate that background. So, you mentioned before, as far as helping farmers and ranchers secure the financing that they need for their operations. So, that's a big thing that why we're talking about this conversation today. And as you guys are, the listeners hear this, it's going to be coming out right around that 9th, 10th of December timeframe. So we're getting into the last month of the year. We're getting into the busiest time of year from a business standpoint, from a family gathering standpoint. So there's so many different activities going on. And so we're getting into the end of the year for tax planning. And then all of a sudden, once we know it, we're going to be in loan renewal season, right? We're going to be getting really busy. And so just to kind of set the stage, the importance of this conversation, so that way you guys continue to listen to us today and all the value that we're going to bring to you is, think about how you're funding your operation right now. In general, most people are going to be using some sort of line of credit to fund their operation, the farming, the ranching, whatever the case is. And in most cases, they're probably not using cash, or maybe not quite fortunate enough to using cash, or maybe after the last year or two, that cash has taken a big hit. Now we need to go back to the bank to have, whether it be plan B or just get financing to continue to do what we love, continue to build this legacy up and kind of maintain this lifestyle that we have, right? And so that's why there's a lot of important things that we're going to be talking about today. So really stay tuned. And so that's why I'm glad to have Bryce on here today. And I guess a little bit of background, full disclosure, Bryce, when Bryce and I actually started working together through CharterWest, he is my banker, trying not to be too hard on him, but it's been great so far. And so once we started diving in and having this conversation, I thought, hey, this guy would be a really good guy to get on the podcast here to really get some inside perspective from the loan process. What's that like, and how we as producers can ultimately do the best job that we can to help you guys out. That's ultimately going to help our operation out, right? So that's why I'm excited to dive into this conversation today. And so let's start with the loan renewal process. Why does everybody come to you? Why does a farmer come to you, whether it be line of credit renewal or just even getting any sort of term notes approved? Let's just start with that process. I feel like we've all been there, done that. At some point, we know that the bank needs some information. We know that they're going to take it somewhere and hopefully get it approved. And then all of a sudden we come back, we're signing papers and we got money in our account, right? I feel like that's kind of the basics, but there's a lot more that goes into that. What would be helpful for the producer to know?
You know what? Yeah, you nailed all the points exactly. But, farmers are just finishing up with one of their more busy seasons, harvest, right? Their operation is fresh in their mind. Talking with farmers right after harvest is probably one of the best and most strategic times for an ag lender to connect and discuss, their finances, plans, goals for next year's cycle. So we can work on getting their operating lines, loans in place for next year. So yeah, now that the crop is out and the farmers have a little bit of time after harvest here, it's time for them to update their financials, get their income statements, balance sheets, any tax documents in place so we can review the year and see how they actually did. We go over their yields, crop income, farm expenses, input costs, whether grain or livestock prices, their contracts, what's in place. The big thing is when it's renewal time, yes, there's a bridge in place. If you're marketing or have contracts for your grain and you're holding on to it, we understand that, because you're trying to get the best bang for your buck when it comes to selling your grain. So we act as, that bridge from the previous year to this coming year. And as long as that left side is heavier than the right side, assets, liabilities, we can obviously proceed with the renewal and getting you guys going for the following year. And I know that's not always the case, but I feel like if everybody just went straight to the elevator with the grain, we would be having a little more tougher conversations. So we do like to see that farmers are heavy when it comes to contracting their grains, having futures in place, things like that. But yeah, as far as getting the financials at the year end, I like to call them their actuals. This is what's in place before you get your taxes done. It's a crucial financing tool that we use to better understand the year's overall production cycle. Like I said, it helps the farmer and the lender evaluate what actually went well and what didn't, per se. We then use this information to review current loans, operating lines, plan renewals or refinances, and discuss next year's credit needs. This goes in hand with preparing for next year's projections and setting up feasible and realistic cash flow. I always ask my borrowers to provide a projected cash flow of their own. Again, as a lender, it helps me to better further understand, ask questions, gauge their operation going into next year. Again, communication is key. So,
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, once you gather up that information, and then so once you get that in the like so going down the line, kind of checking the boxes, what's next as far as trying to get some funding approved for the producer? Where do you go from there?
Once we get all the information and we look it over, again, it's just making sure we have everything accounted for, make sure all the bushels are there. If there's any accounts receivables that are coming in, just mainly not forgetting, or if we do have something that we're planning for, open dialogue and letting us know that so we can plan accordingly. After we get all that information, we do a credit analysis, do a nice little write-up on the operation in itself, like to make crucial notes as far as what went well, kind of, and like everything, every year isn't perfect. There's setbacks, there's breakdowns, repairs, costs that you weren't expecting. So just making notes of that, I mean, it all goes hand in hand, just like anything, but there's enough of a margin there for error that, we take into account. It's not like we're going to bust you over for, paying your repair bill. Why did you pay that, or why did you do that? No, it's just, we know it's part of farming and it's part of life. And so, yeah, but for the most part, the figures tell the story, but to have further dialogue to back those figures is also crucial. So that's why having that open conversation, dialogue, making notes throughout the year, having updated financials throughout the year and not just waiting to the year end to do so. It just boils down to being more accurate. And if something does come up, not waiting till the last minute to decide to do something, right? That you have your financials already in place. You've been making well documentation of everything. It's just like farming. Timing's everything. And no different than us trying to get you guys rolling or having the credit and the financing that you need in place so you guys can keep your guys' operation on track. If that answers that question at all. I know I kind of rambled on there for a second, but yeah. But
no, I think that's good because it paints the picture as to what, why you need the information, and why you're trying to gather it all up. And you mentioned before, so you're trying to build that credit analysis, right? And so you, from the loan officer there, the lender, trying to kind of gauge, all right, I'm sure to most cases it's like, oh, hey, we're just trying to gather the information and get it approved. There's maybe not a lot of question about if we should do this or why we should do this, yada, yada. I'm sure there's some of those accounts out there, but okay, so now we kind of build up this analysis. Where are we going from here? Are we going to the board? Are you able to approve some of those things? Or are they going to loan committee? What does that look like?
Again, with that analysis, I got to prepare it and make all those documentations. And yes, over a certain amount or below, it goes to a certain lending approval committee. And anything over X amount goes to our senior board for approval. So just depending on the size of the farm, the size of the line, the overall total line commitment that individual has with the bank, just depends on who it's got to go to for overall final approval. So for the most part, with majority of the lenders or majority of the borrowers that I facilitate with, it's been pretty easy so far. So knock on wood. But yeah, no, it's a good little system that every bank's different, but good system they have in place to, making sure we're checking off and we're making good loans and we're not putting somebody behind the eight ball further. But for the most part, yeah, mainly do all the credit analysis work and then present it accordingly like we're doing now. And that usually, happens about once a month. We go to committee with our loans for approval. But depending on the size of the line, it's, just send out a email to certain lenders within the bank. And as long as we get a yes on it, then away we go. So.
Right. And so what I think is helpful to kind of look into there, and what you talked about is, it depends on the kind of line that you're trying to get, to the loan that you're trying to get, or the total operational lines that you have out there. There's a lot to really think about there. And so, not only once you do your work, you do the back end work of trying to put this credit analysis together, then you're trying to basically present that to the board, right? And so I feel like we get this connotation in our head that, okay, I sent my information to the banker today. By 5 days from now, I should have a loan approved. You know what I mean? Like, we feel like it should be a little bit more snap of the fingers. And that's not always the case.
Right. Yeah, because that's what it was like 20 years ago, right? I went to my banker, he said yes, and I got the money. It was in my account. Well, unfortunately, with all the guidelines and restrictions that nowadays that are in place, we have to thoroughly make sure everything is good on our end before just saying, yep, you're good to go. So I know it's being a young lender and working with seasoned producers and stuff, I can see why sometimes it's hair pulling and they're frustrated with it, but just being open about it and just telling them this is how we have to do it. This is why I need it. For the most part, it's been fine, but do have one of those every now and then, back to when, just chuckle and giggle. I'm like, yeah, I know my job would be a lot easier too, but I kind of put myself on the line as well. But no, sorry.
Right. No. And I just think that's a matter of adjusting expectations to reality, and making sure that we know what to expect going into this, but there is a part of this process that we can kind of expedite or speed up a little bit. And that's the part that we are responsible and kind of in control of as the producer. And so let's just kind of go into that conversation. What can the producer do to really help you out as the kind of the go-between, really, the person that's ultimately trying to secure the financing for our operation? And what can we do to help kind of speed that process up, make sure you have the information that you need to best paint that picture?
Yes. And like you nailed it. As a lender, especially with new ag borrowers, I am trying to paint a picture of the operation from the information as I'm receiving it. And the more detailed information, the better. Example, if you have personal or family loans, outside debt obligations with other lenders, co-ops, etc., like, be open to us about those items. Don't let us have to go and try and figure out, like, okay, why isn't this adding up? Or just being detailed about it. Don't try hiding stuff. It usually doesn't boil down good for either the borrower or the producer. So the more information, the more financial information and the more detailed you are, I can work with that a lot easier than having to backtrack or after it's been approved and then the committee seeing it or asking questions. Like, I can already have those questions already answered rather than let me get back to you on that, So being fully prepared when it goes to, that final hurdle of getting approval is crucial. And I like to just ask myself questions on what the committee or what those approving lenders are going to ask me, make sure I have all my T's crossed, I's dotted as well. But as far as, to set yourself apart from other, I guess, producers or farmers, staying on top and keeping your financials up to date and being well organized throughout the year is so crucial. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on that yet, but that also plays a hand into why it's important to have your financials in place throughout the year, not just at the end. Even doing a quarterly update is better than, waiting till the end. But yeah, that's for the most part why it's important for us is, again, it comes down to time. You guys obviously want your money as soon as possible, and I want to get you your guys' money as soon as possible. And I'm I'm one of those, I guess, lenders to say is if it's in front of me, I want to get it done as soon as I can. Nothing worse than sitting there waiting for, updated financials or, hey, we need to have this tax document, or when you get a chance, we need updated loan information from outside lenders. It's like, when we ask for it, we can get it all at one time. That's the best. So it just, like I said, speeds up the process, eliminates that downtime, and then you forget certain things. It's just having it all at once is what we're trying to get to. And that's the overall goal of that first step of getting your operating line renewed for next year.
Right. And really, the part there that I heard is all at once, which can be hard for farmers when, say you're trying to update finances from the last 8 months or 10 months or something like that. So it can be really hard to gather up that information and to be thinking ahead, to have that plan and be proactive. Like, hey, my line of credit needs to be done here. So I need to have this information to Bryce by this time, which means I now need to have everything updated ahead of time. So it's just kind of a backtracking that and thinking ahead to make sure that we get you the information that we need ahead of time. And so you've kind of mentioned it already, but really highlights why is it important to have such good information that's not leaving you question or wonder if it's all there or if it's accurate, or why is that so helpful for you, once again, to kind of paint that picture?
Yeah, it just eliminates the confusion and then boils down to just being more accurate. When I say confusion, it's all right, he's got this listed here as this expense, like it's just a number. Like I need some background information to it, like, being a little more detailed with it. And again, explaining, okay, this is what happened, this took place, yada, 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 just make it so if I'm looking at it for the first time, I will know what it is rather than just, well, I know what it is, so you should know what it is type of thing.
Okay, so let's flip that actually. And this is where I kind of want to go next. We were talking about what is it, how is it helpful? Truthfully, what are the negatives if we don't do this, right? Or if we don't have the best communication, or we're not the most organized, we're not the most detailed, and maybe we're a little bit late to talking to you. Hey, Bryce, by the way, I already bought this. What can you do to help me out? Or I'm sure you've had those experiences. Hopefully not very many, but we all got to think about that because as farmers, let's face it, we've got so much going on, and financing and sitting in the office is not our favorite thing to do, right? But we also know it's important. So let's talk about that. What are some of the negatives if we don't focus on some of this?
Again, the number one thing that I guess comes to mind is just the communication, being proactive and not reactive. Again, I know you guys are going to get tired of me saying this, but I keep saying, being organized, being proactive and not reactive. Don't wait till the last minute. That's why it's important for the borrower to have their financials updated throughout the year. We're able to get the lending process up and running in a timely manner quickly. Again, comes back to that whole timing thing. Farming is all about timing nowadays, and we want to get those lines and your guys' money to you as soon as possible. And the last thing I want to do is the farmer waiting on me when I am sitting in the office trying to get you guys all your funding accordingly. So, but yeah, communication, again, with today's technology, a simple text or a simple call anytime during the day. It's like, don't wait to the last minute. If something's brewing in your mind and you want to run it by, I'd rather have you do that. So it gives me an idea on what we are looking at or what we're thinking of doing.
No, absolutely. Okay. So now this next question that I have for you, I think is going to be really valuable, but also might catch you off guard a little bit. So, for you as almost the go-between, the lender that's trying to talk to the producer, paint that picture, then take it to loan committee or take it to whoever you need to get that approved. What kind of weight is on your shoulders when you're looking at these operations? Maybe the operations that are going through a difficult time, or as we look to 2025 and 2026, not the easiest years in the row crop sector. Cattle are kind of living high, but that's a different story. But when you're talking with operations, times don't look very good. What kind of weight is on your shoulders as you're trying to predict, okay, should I lend to this customer or not? Is this going to be the best financial move to go down this route? Explain what that's like from a personal standpoint to have some of that weight on your shoulders as well. How do you feel that?
Every operation, every farmer is different. So it's not like it's a cookie cutter, every loan is, like I said, everyone has their ways of dealing with things. We have a certain way of how we're going to, help this individual or help this producer with what they're dealing with. And the worst thing a lender can do is just kick the can down the road. We have to look at the root cause of why we're not making money or why we're losing money, or what different things can we do within the operation that can be more beneficial than what we've been doing for the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, right? So I truthfully am more honest and upfront with my borrowers than probably most. Doing this for, 10 years now, like, you can see the red flags pretty easily. So just having those conversations with them even before, going to committee, like, is what I try doing. This year is, if we don't have a good year, I probably have to find another bank to work with. That's the last thing I want to do. I want to work with these guys. I want to get through them. I want to see past their bad times. I want to see them in their good times. And I feel there are ways of doing it, but there's also ways that you can, dig yourself even a deeper hole per se. And, just being completely honest with them and truthful. And, if they're not willing to do certain things to change, to better their operation, then that's kind of when it falls back on the borrower. And, you don't want to have that conversation, but sometimes you do have to have that. And fortunately, I've been lucky enough to not have to have too many of them conversations, but getting overextended is the last thing you want to put your borrower in. And just having those conversations early and before the whole renewal or approval process is kind of what I try doing. And then think of, yes, I don't want your business to go somewhere else, but if there's a better avenue that can better facilitate what you're trying to do or what you're needing, then yes, I will be more than happy to, reach out to who I need to accordingly and give them, the backstory or what's kind of been the struggles and see if they can help as well. So, CharterWest is a very young bank. Reason why they're at is because of farmers, producers, ranchers, and I believe that they're just not going to kick a farmer to the side just because, they didn't make ends meet one year or so. They've been, for the most part, from what I'm gathering, they will help and do it the best that they possibly can to make sure that operation stays up and running.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's all banks to some extent, but there's obviously difference in banks. That's why there's multiple different banks out there, and we all function, operate differently, and multiple different loan officers as well. And so we also got to acknowledge, what are they seeing from their perspective? I've talked about this in the past and I guess you can shed some light on this, but as you get to maybe the more balance sheets that you look at that aren't very fun, or maybe taking a bit of a hit or losing some equity just because of the year, just because of the kind of factors that are at hand that were dealt, right? It's probably not easy on you as the lender. You got to kind of take that in a bit of perspective as well. When the producer comes to you, if you're dealing with all these challenging times, we got to have a little bit of grace in that as well. It's kind of a two-way street, just kind of, really being humans about all of this too, is to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to facilitate our needs, but also, realizing the shoes that you're in and the kind of the position that you're in as the lender as well.
And we all know that the farm economy has been slightly down, these last 3 or 4 years, right? It's a volatile industry, and we know that as lenders. So it's not like, we've been here before. They know what's going on, but it's how are we managing these down years when it comes to overall, working capital, your cash, minimizing as much as we can when it comes to the loss. Why are we buying new equipment when we know this is happening? Why are we looking to grow when we can't afford to do that? It's those little things like that. An 80 came up that you guys been farming and now they're looking to sell it. Yes, I know you guys want that 80. You've been farming it so much, but if it just doesn't pencil out, then, it's tough. But yeah, I know everybody wants the latest and greatest green or red paint, right? But if it just doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you can justify it by, well, the repair costs are here, or, my payment's going to go down there, but at the end of the day, you still have a payment, and that payment's not going to go away until it's, paid off. So anyway.
Right. No, everything can be justified as a farmer. We can always justify everything, but paying for everything is when things become reality, right? And so, you as a lender probably see that firsthand, and it's probably interesting when you get those different conversations that come in, and they're, gun ho, or maybe it's a young producer, just somebody that's actively growing, and you're like, pump the brakes a little bit. I'm sure that's not always the easiest conversations, but that's, it's kind of the reality of the world that we live in, right? We got to make sure that somebody's there to pump those brakes a little bit. And in order to do that, in order to make sure that we're analyzing that information, you got to have the right information. And so I guess, unless you got anything else to comment on that, I wanted to talk about, so here lately, we went through kind of our loan renewal process, right, with our own operation. And so basically, as we work together, kind of the process that we used, that we established, with Pioneer Farmer, we use that same process within our own operation to get our loans approved, to make sure that we're getting our financing secure for our operation, right? And so let's talk about what that was like to have this Pioneer Farmer process, so to speak, and the information that we provided you. And when I say this, I'm not trying to toot my own horn a little bit, but from your perspective, to work with somebody that was really organized, had the information that you needed when you needed it, what was that like, as we provided you all that information to paint that picture going to the loan committee there?
Yeah, not to get too, I guess, in depth with your guys' operation or anything, but I've, like I said, been doing this for 10 years, and we've been working for less than 2-3 months right now. Your guys' financials and all the supporting docs that I needed to make your guys' renewal happen, and for the other items, it was the smoothest process I've worked with in my 10 years of lending. You guys had it to me within less than a couple of days, and I think that next week we were signing loan docs. So yeah, you nailed all of it as far as being organized, getting your items to me in a timely manner, and being detailed. And it was the easiest picture I ever painted in my head. So no, as far as the lender goes.
There too, like I said, not trying to toot our own horn, but with the process that we've established with Pioneer Farmer, trying to make sure you have that information. A lot of things that we're giving them is everything that you need, and trying to answer those questions before they're even asked, right? Between the balance sheet being updated, the cash flow being detailed, and then we have kind of a business plan and even an operational assessment guide that we give you everything that's going to help you, but it's going to help us. And so what does that mean really for the producer standpoint, to have this information in your hands when you need it?
Just to be straight honest with you, it comes down to having lower interest rates on your operating. Money saved, and with that lower interest rate, yes, it's still paying on it, but being, 50 to 75 basis points below what your average producer has, that's money saved, money in your pocket. So yes, I take that all into an account when I'm going through the loan process and working with my borrowers. And if it's saving me time and energy, I'll reward you guys back with, and having proof and documenting it and being able to go board with it is just more ammunition that I have in my pocket that says, hey, no, these guys are well organized. They got their business model and plan here, and we need to, scratch their backs like they just scratched ours. So yeah, it all boils down to just knowing your operation and being proactive on everything. It's a comfort. It's nice to have, knowing that you're working with somebody that fully grasps what's going on. And like we've mentioned a few times already, paint that picture. So yeah, it all comes down to just being a good producer and being a stewardess of the land. And you have to be rewarded in some way. And what better way than having a better interest rate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like we're just kind of beating around the bush here, trying to establish newer words and, trying to reinvent the wheel to some extent with saying that, it all comes down to communication, being open, and have the right organization, all that. But one thing that you mentioned was having the ammunition that you need, like I said, and that's what working with the clients that we do with Pioneer Farm. And that's why we're trying to give them process, make themselves organized, provide that clarity and confidence for them, but also, like I said, back to the lender, so they can secure the financing for their operation and giving that ammunition. That's really what this boils down to, is giving them that ammunition, right? And that's what it was nice to kind of get that feedback from you as we went through that process. And it is also nice, like I said, to know that the hard work that we've put in as the producer, somebody that sat in the office and did their due diligence and put all that information together, was recognized, but also rewarded, right? And rewarded in the form of not just a pat on the back, but hey, money saved and money earned as well in the form of interest rates there. So, and that's where it's just nice to have that little bit of gratification as well for all the hard work that we did.
There you go. Nailed it. Yes, exactly. And I like rewarding good producers. And if that's something that I can provide and do, it's no sweat off me, and want to continue that good working relationship down the road. And you and I are both, young in our profession. So why start later if we can start it now? So
100%. No, I agree. So the next question that I have for you, I think is kind of interesting as we kind of get to rounding this out a little bit, to give the listener, to give the producer some ideas as to where to even maybe focus their time. Obviously, we want to do it all. We want to improve all areas of our operation and improve this relationship with the lender. But one thing that we've mentioned on the podcast before, people mention this all the time, the 5 C's of credit, right? And just to give a little bit of a recap on that, when we're talking about the 5 C's of credit, we're talking about 1 being character, 2 being capacity/cash flow, 3 being capital, 4 being collateral, 5 being conditions, right? So I'm sure you're familiar with all of those.
Yep.
But in your eyes, as the one that's sitting on that side of the desk, I know it's really hard to nail that down to maybe 1 or 2, but which ones do you feel like is the most important there?
I feel like our whole conversation has been, of the 5 C's, we've touched on this C probably the most from when we first started this podcast. But, I'm going to sound pretty like a lame duck here, but all 5 C's are essentially important and play a crucial role when it comes to making and evaluating the overall creditworthiness that ag borrower producer possesses. But the one that I catch myself and tend to gravitate more towards is the first one, is character. Having the trustworthiness, the management ability, history, track record, timely payments, integrity, honesty, overall experience of what you're showing me, and that has reflected. But again, most importantly, it's that darn communication and having an open dialogue, So when I'm doing the financials, reviewing them, going over and stuff, not only am I just plugging in numbers, but I'm also putting this number in because, he talks about doing this, they're doing that, so forth and so on. So they're more than just numbers. If we can put some type of detail behind those numbers, that's where it's crucial and that's where it helps the producer overall, in my eyes. So I would say character. I've always been a character lender, so yep, character for me.
And that's great. I guess, the one thing I really like about that being character as, if a guy's going to improve on one thing or really focus on that, I think that's a good area. But part of that being is that's really the only one of those that we have the most control over, right? Is our character, our attitude, all that. I mean, yeah, we can do our best to make sure that we're having a positive cash flow, but, shit happens, right? I mean, things just come up. Engines break. We have failures here and there. Crops don't do as well as we hope. Conditions change all the time. Collateral. We can do the best in all of those other areas. But character, at the end of the day, if we've got a great operation and we don't communicate it to the lender, we don't present ourselves in a way that's in a professional format, it's only going to go so far with the rest of those. And so, I mean, I would probably generally agree with that. So I'm glad we're kind of on the same terms there. So yeah, character being very important there. As we get to kind of rounding this out a little bit today, Bryce, I do appreciate this conversation, but what else do you think producers need to know going into the end of the year, going into line of credit renewal? What can they do to help out their lenders? What are some things that you're seeing right now? Just kind of shoot off a few things and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I know it's going to sound like beating a dead horse here, but it's just having a good idea of your overall financial position and backing those numbers up with what took place and just really having a good grasp of what we're going to be thinking about doing going next year. Are we going to change some things up? What we can do to improve from what we learned the previous year. And again, trying not to reinvent the wheel. You guys know what you're doing, but don't get yourself in a position to where you're changing so much to where it's going to be detrimental, from what you guys have been doing, for the last 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Just being a little more proactive than reactive and just staying on top of things. But yeah, we don't know what's going on with any of the prices when it comes to the commodities, or, beef is holding strong, but again, it's a volatile world and you just don't know what's going to happen right in front of you. But you can always plan accordingly and things fall in place, and just hope everything financial wise is there and do what we can to help. So
100%. And I think that's a good way to kind of end this out. But the last question I do have is, how do you feel like, whether it be CharterWest or even you as a personal banker, how do you feel like you can kind of really help the producers out? Maybe what sets you guys apart? Or what should even producers be a little bit, whether it be leery about, or whether they should be searching for this in their lender, or just kind of, what do you think from that perspective?
When planning, and again, I don't know if this will answer the question or anything, but being conservative, and I like a conservative just plan overall cash flow. So yeah, just kind of stress test your own cash flows and stuff, that break even margin. Don't plan for, those subsidies or the government checks or whatever you want to call them. I typically don't plan for those within it. Yes, they are a nice safety net to have. But again, I think I could say by all producers that if they can make a living without that, that's probably the overall goal. But yeah, just stress test things, see what your break evens are. And again, if you need help with that, I know you're really good with it. If anything, I should probably be going to you on that. But yeah, just having a really good understanding of your operation and what we're going to do the following year to be successful.
So would you say the first thing that somebody should do after they get done listening to this is give their banker a call?
They should probably give their banker a call, indeed. Yes, while it's still fresh in their head.
And if they don't answer, call Bryce, right?
Yeah. You can get me at. No, I'll let you guys visit with Garrett, and if Garrett wants to have his lender at disposal, so it takes time away from him whenever Garrett might need something, or Russ Camp Farms.
Right. No, like I said, Bryce, I do appreciate the value that you brought here today. And it's nice to have the conversation from somebody on that side of the desk, because we probably don't give you guys enough credit, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of things from a farmer's perspective that we want done now, and we don't see ourselves as some of the issues to the problems, or the reasons that they're not going as quick as we want it to, or the lack of the organization, or whatever the case is, right? We could go on, and we have. But like I said, I'm grateful for you to come on here and share some value. And I look forward to continuing these conversations in the future and having you back on as things change and as things get updated throughout the different seasons that we have to deal with, right? So any closing comments as we get to rounding this one out today, Bryce?
Yeah. And for the most part, like, I don't want to make it sound like every farmer, is disorganized and the information they get me is, and it's not. Of the producers that I've worked with and stuff, they are well organized, and they do have you can just tell on which farmer it is, and it's a reflection of their overall operation. It really is. The individuals that I can just call and say, hey, when you get a second, can you email me your stuff? Those are the guys that have the working capital. Their operating lines are paid down, and they have very little on it. So it does go hand in hand with it. And like I said, it's just an overall reflection of them as a producer. So I'm not just saying that just to say it to make my job easier, but it really does go hand in hand. The first time meeting you guys, like, you sent me over your stuff, went out, like, yep, this totally adds up. This makes total sense. Yeah, not saying it just to make conversation, but it really does. If you have those items and are well organized, it's just a testament of your overall operation. And for the most part, guys that I've been working with now, you kind of get them trained to do that. Hey, you need to be doing this. And the next year, it's way smoother than that first year. And then it just keeps getting better and better and better once you have that established balance sheet, cash flow. And even for the guys that aren't as tech savvy when it comes to Excel sheets or keeping up, at least we have a good foundation to work from year in to year out or throughout the year. So getting that initial balance sheet and income and expense on file are crucial.
For sure. Well, Bryce, like I said, I do thank you again one last time. And if anybody's interested in reaching out to Bryce, or, asking themselves, well, my banker doesn't seem like he's, communicating as well back with me, or maybe you're locally, or not even that local, you guys do business all over the place. You got CharterWest branches all over the place. Reach out to me or look CharterWest up and you can learn more about them. But like I said, appreciate you coming on today, and thanks for the conversation. But for now, we'll catch you guys next time.
Garrett, thank you again.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share, or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram at Garrett Ruskamp, or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.